Hello, hello, and welcome. The lighting is a little crazy here since it's a bit overcast and it's sort of dark and then brightening up, but you don't really need to see me. We're looking at the charts primarily here, and I am inspired by how my red tent ladies have been learning to read their charts one puzzle piece at a time. And based upon how well they're coming along 6 months into our journey, I really wanted to do a bit of a support in teaching you how to understand your Mercury retrograde process and how to take that into your own chart. So I'm not going to look at anybody's specific chart as we would do that in the red tent process. And if you're interested in that, check the links below. You can always join that journey with me. But for this particular thing, I want to talk about how to, first of all, find out where the Mercury retrograde is happening, and then you can apply that to your chart, and also understanding a little bit about the shadow. I know I have done videos on this before, but we're just in the pre-shadow of this Mercury retrograde now, and I just feel like it's time to kind of begin the journey as the journey is beginning. And that is so appropriate for just coming off the back of a Gemini full moon, as we are as I'm recording this, and also being in Sagittarius season, journeying and exploring and trying to understand is, here comes the rain, is definitely a thing. Okay, so when you come into AstroSeek, which is one that I often speak into using, and I usually do these forecasts on, it's a free app that you can use, and it's really, really amazing and user-friendly and has so much more than most people will ever really even need. I haven't even used it to its full capacity yet, so most of us will never get there, but start simple. So one of the things is this little tab, Astro Tools, at the top. And that's going to tell us where our retrogrades are. You would just come down here to retrograde planets. Okay, click on that, but I'm already there. So let me scroll down. So now I've gone in here, change your local time, and you can put in whatever time zone you want. And that's going to make it more specific to your area. However, you don't really have to do that to see the degree range. It's just going to be the exact time that it goes retrograde in your time zone, etc., or whatever it is that you're looking at. So we would start here and we would see the Mercury retrogrades of the year of 2023. And if we go down, you can see Venus retrograde, Mars retrograde. There wasn't a Mars did, he went direct in January. So he is pictured here. Jupiter retrograde, Saturn. Okay, so you can see there's plenty. There's also more to look at as you scroll down, but let's not go that far. I just wanted you to realize there's more to this page than just the Mercury. One of the newer features on this app is that they give us the Mercury shadow, which is really cool, and I'm going to show that to you now. First of all, we're at the end of the year, so we're going to come and look here and say, okay, so Mercury goes retrograde. Retrograde begins December 13th, 2023 in the sign of Capricorn. Obviously, one has to learn the glyphs over time. Google them if you're not sure. At 8 degrees and 29 minutes. I usually just talk into the 8 degrees, unless it's right near the end of that 8-degree point that I might say 9 degrees or whatever. But, you know, depending on your level of your astrology, how particular and pedantic you want to be. So it stations retrograde at 8 degrees of Capricorn, and it stations direct at 22 degrees of Sagittarius on the 2nd of January, 2024. Now, if we pop Mercury shadow periods there, you can see that it's going to open it out. This is a newish feature. Okay, because we're right at the end of the year, we're going to have to jump into 2024 in a moment to see where that ends, because the retrograde ends in 2024. But you can see here that the pre-shadow began on the 25th of November. I'm recording this on the 29th, so it's literally just happened. The full moon in Gemini was on the 27th. If you watch my forecast on that, you'll remember that I said Mercury had just entered his shadow, his pre-shadow. And we've spoken about the shadow period before, but the pre-shadow is really that time where we get to go the first point over those degrees and have a think. So before we move on from that, I'm going to jump us into the chart of Mercury stationing retrograde, which is on the 13th of December at 8 degrees and 29 minutes of Capricorn. So here's that chart, 13th of December. Obviously, I've done this for my own time zone, which I'm going to be doing the new moon in Sagittarius forecast as well. And that is the same day. Okay, so that is interesting to note. It doesn't always work that way. So at a new moon point, if we were to look at what does this Mercury retrograde have in store for us, and we look at that beginning point, when does it station? What was happening in the sky on the day that Mercury stationed retrograde? And then we would apply it to our own chart. What is it touching in my chart? And obviously we're thinking about Mercury because this is Mercury retrograde, but Mercury is not the only fellow in the sky. He's got a bunch of friends up there, all doing their own thing and having their own cycles and dynamics with the other planets. So this would be called a mundane chart. We would look at this and we would say, okay, well, when Mercury goes retrograde, what's everybody else doing? How's Mercury interacting with everybody else? How are they interacting with him? And what does that mean for in my chart? If I look at how those are all interacting in my natal chart, my birth chart, because that is your blueprint, everything really comes back to your birth chart. You say, what was happening at my birth? Then everything moves on from that blueprint that is my greatest potential. But as things come around and touch things from my birth chart or in my birth chart, then it ignites something, it highlights something, it activates, it energizes, sometimes in a really positive way, sometimes in a really challenging way. Ultimately, all of these things are polishing us up like the rough diamond that needs polishing. And there's always polishing to do. There's always the next level of polishing to do. Even that polished diamond starts to get scuffed, needs a repolish. So this is what we're kind of thinking to as we look at the chart of when Mercury stations retrograde, the same day as the new moon. So Mercury stations retrograde before that first. So I'm going to show you. Here's Mercury at 8 degrees and 29 minutes. And if you look over here on the side, it says ST, stationed, stationed. Now we know, because we've checked our chart already, that he's stationed retrograde, because it might say station when we go direct. Although let me just see what this app does. Yeah, just says station. Okay, so different things might have slightly different way of doing it, but ST is stationed. Okay, so we know this is when Mercury stations retrograde. So he's gotten here in Capricorn, 8 degrees, he's stopped. He's about to start heading back. Remember, this is more of an optical illusion in terms of astronomy than it is actually moving backwards in the sky. He's not literally moving backwards in the sky. But for the energetic delineation of this, we want to think about it that way. He's going backwards. Whenever a planet is going backward, it's like that planet's energy, whatever he brings to the, or she brings to the table, needs to go back and do a reroute of something, a reboot, a reroute, a rehash, a rethink, a redo, whatever. Mercury is our thinking. So there might be a restorying. Mercury is short trips and travel. There may be issues around those things. Let's say you took the trip from your house to the airport only to realize you forgot your passport and you have to go back, or you forgot your tickets and you have to go back. It's those kind of things like, oh, silly little mistake, maybe costs me my flight. Those kinds of things, not reading contracts and things clearly, because you're in this like busy mind and thinking back about something else and you're not focused on what you're doing. And then you sign something that you shouldn't have signed, or you misunderstood a clause, or misunderstanding in communication, because Mercury is about communication. So you read a tone wrong. I feel like in terms of us doing so much of our messaging via like messages, we often can't hear a person's tone. And so we assume a person's tone. That's a big mistake, oftentimes, especially in Mercury retrogrades. But even if you're talking to someone, I mean, I know for myself, if I'm in an oversensitive space, I feel like people are shouting at me, even though they're not shouting. Maybe I have an argument with my kids, or not even an argument, just a thing. I'm sensitive. I feel like they're shouting. I say, please stop shouting. And they're like, well, we're not shouting. But that's how it feels to me because I'm in that space. Now, when Mercury's retrograde, that's common. You know, they may feel like you're shouting at them and you're like, but I'm not shouting. Or you may feel this, you know, that. So when we're talking about Mercury, we want to think about Mercury things. We want to think about Mercury things because he's thinking. We want to think about what's coming out of our mouth, speaking, communication, what's coming into our ears. What am I hearing? What am I understanding? Am I understanding what you're saying? In fact, that wonderful way of speaking where you say, it sounds like you're saying, or what I hear you saying, and then you give the person the opportunity to go, no, that's not what I meant by that. What I was trying to say is this, and then you reiterate. So what it sounds like you're saying is this. No, you still haven't quite got it right. I mean, it's a long back and forth if you do it that way, especially in Mercury retrograde, but it will make sure that you can be more discerning. And because Mercury is stationing retrograde in Capricorn, we want to look at the Capricorn stuff. And Capricorn is like, let's come back to the practicalities here. What are you actually saying? What is really happening? Because everything's starting to feel a little bit confusing, and I really want to get down to, like, let's flatten that. Let's make it, there's black and white, there's right, wrong and right. And then Capricorn really wants to do that. We need to build on a foundation of understanding. I can't build this project if I think you said that, but actually you think you said this. We need to know where we stand. We need to get on the same page. That's very Capricorn, and not a bad thing. So depending on your own chart and where you have Mercury in your chart, you might find it that you think more easily in a Capricorny way or an earthy way, or you may find that you do not. So if you have your Mercury in an air sign, this may have you all over the place a lot of the time, and then to bring it back to that foundational level might be so difficult and uncomfortable. Yet, in a Mercury retrograding starting in Capricorn, this may be a point at which you actually can do that. It gives you the space to do that. So anyway, I digress, as a Gemini is wont to do. Okay, so Mercury is stationed retrograde, but now we can see that it hasn't, oh no, I'm sorry, it actually is, I lied to you, I lied. It was after the exact new moon, and we can see that because the moon's already at 25 degrees, and so she's not at 20 degrees with the sun, she's moved on. So it is literally a short few hours after the moon has left that new moon with Sagittarius, where we come into a new cycle of Sagittarian things, that Mercury goes retrograde. And so now that means Mercury is heading back to the moon as the moon is heading forward to Mercury. So Mercury and the moon will be the first planets to meet as Mercury has begun his retrograde process. And the moon is often representative of the people. So what people are coming into my life. And I maybe need people that are grounding and organized and practical and nurturing in my space right now in order for me to get that headspace reset. I also, and maybe I'm speaking very personally here, but I really feel like this is an opportunity for us at the holiday season point of the year with this retrograde on to take some time out from the regular busy, buzzy mind and to give ourselves that opportunity to reset and reboot. I myself am definitely going to try and take this, and I know it's not an easy thing for me to do. So I'm already trying to prepare myself and be organized, Capricorn, have done all my pre-prep, like this video, get these things done so that I can switch off. So I think that, and the moon's going to come there and want to like nurture that frazzled mind that's had a year of crazy and just come and say, it's okay, let's just nurture. The Mercury will carry on going back, and he's going to end up going over the sun and over Mars. So if we, oops, hang on. Okay, if we come back to the retrogrades here, we see that it stations at, oh wait, this is now, I can't see, hang on. Okay, wait, sorry, because I've opened it out to the shadow. We can't see as easily. It stations at 8 degrees and it goes all the way to 22 degrees of Sagittarius. So coming back to the starting chart, I wonder, hang on, I'm going to tell you if he goes over Mars. Yes, he does go over Mars. Okay, so he is going to come back. He's going to go all the way over Sun, Moon, and Mars. Mars is how we get things done. So when Mercury, our mind, comes backwards over Mars, it also gives us that opportunity to go, so coming into the new year, how am I going to get things done in a more efficient way that doesn't give me too much of a brain frazzle? Again, you want to look at where your Mercury is to understand how your Mercury works. Like I said about air, that's a lot of like busy mind, very frazzly. If you have a watery moon, as I do, you might get a little bit too emotionally invested in everything, and everything becomes very, you want to nurture and support and feel through everything so much that your mind starts just feeling overloaded with everybody else's feelings and needs. If you have a fiery moon, you might, a fiery Mercury, you might find that you are very quick to act, very quick to think, and then also burn out your mind quite quickly, because fire can do that. Lots of great creative, dynamic ideas, and then like just flatten out if you don't know how to put logs on that fire. And as I say, with if you are born with an earthy Mercury, then you might find that when things are too busy, you just shut down and go to ground because you want to calm down. So if you're taking this period of the retrograde to go, well, what is my Mercury setting? And I just did the elements there, not all of the signs, and just a brief touch. So you want to take this into your chart. But what is my Mercury setting, and how does the retrograde in Capricorn, Earth, and Sagittarius, Fire, how does that impact me? By the time that Mercury is retrograding over the doing planet of Mars, it's in fire. So it's like I'm resetting, but I'm trying to plan ahead of time how to bring the fire, bring the action, bring the energy into next year. But not just yet. I'm holding it back a little, still in retrograde. Sort of the same with the sun. When he goes over the sun, which will actually be before Mars. See how I'm talking out of order a little bit? Sorry, I have that very strong Mercury energy in my chart. So that's a jumpy, aroundy energy at the best of times, especially as we are in the pre-shadow. But when it goes over the sun is our purpose. The sun is our soul light. The sun is where we bring our brightest stuff into the world. That's where your sun is in your chart. When we're going over the sun, it's giving us an opportunity to shine here, to find a bit of light and purpose, and again, dynamic energy. So sun and Mars feel very, very, very potent for this Mercury retrograde, because Sun and Mars have been together in the sky. They don't do that often. Only 2024, the end of the year, I think it's only in December, we're going into our next Mars retrograde. And the last one was the beginning of 2023. It came to an end. So Mars only does a retrograde around every 2 years. And when he retrogrades, he and the sun are furthest from each other. We'd have the sun, we'd have Earth in the middle, and we'd have Mars. And they're as far as they can get from each other. Where they have just been now, where they are currently traveling, is as close as they get to each other. We have the Mars with the sun and Earth. In fact, Mars on the far side, sun and Earth on the other side. So we have, at the moment, the sun and Mars energy is really potent with each other. Potent and engaged and active, and they're both these very masculine energies. Sun is very masculine, hot. Mars is very masculine, hot. They are dynamic, they are intense, they are in a fire sign. Add to the fire. And it's a sign that is very philosophical and really wants to learn and explore and travel and cross cultures and cross boundaries, which is super great energy for this time in history right now. If we could become a little bit more accepting of other people's spiritual beliefs, of other people's everything, okay, cultures, colors, genders, da 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 da. That is all a narrative that is really at the moment, through this sort of energy being enhanced. The sun and Mars actually met in Scorpio. So they began their new journey. It was like a new Mars cycle in Scorpio, which is saying we're going to touch on some deep places, but then they're traveling through much of Sagittarius together. The full moon in Gemini, they were very, very close still. By the time, you can see here, by the time that we are hitting the new moon in Sag, there's a bit of a distance creeping in between them. They're not as intense, but they're still very powerful, because when that new moon was when Mercury had been in his shadow, pre-shadow, for 2 days. And so the pre-shadow began with Mars and Sun even closer than they are when we see this point of actually going retrograde. So the Sun-Mars dynamic, potent energy has been very much a signature for Mercury. And remember that Mercury ruled the Gemini full moon. And actually Mercury and the moon were out of bounds. They were a little bit out of their space, which gives them a little bit more clout and dynamism. They're less boundaried, so they may be more inclined to say the things they normally wouldn't say, to do the slightly more outrageous maverick thing that they wouldn't do during the Gemini full moon. And I did a forecast on that. I don't want to jump back to that, but that was the beginning of Mercury's shadow. So all the things that have come up since the 25th of this, what are we on? November, November, through that pre-shadow, which will take us all the way to the retrograde point at the 13th. So 25th of November to the 13th of December, we are definitely experiencing the pre-shadow, which is the first pass from 22 degrees, which is just beyond the sun, 22 degrees to 8 degrees, 22 Sag to 8 Capricorn. I want you to go look in your chart and say, where do I have 22 Sag to 8 Capricorn? Because from the 25th, Mercury is moving from 22 Sag to 8 Capricorn. Did that touch a planet? Did that square a planet? Did that oppose a planet for you? It could have done other things, but those are the tough ones. When it's going straight over a planet, when it's opposite a planet, or if it's squaring a planet. So if that was happening for you, you would have felt this more strongly. If you had nothing obvious, it may be a gentler Mercury retrograde for you. So some are harder and some are easier. Some make you work a bit more, get through a bit more, evolve a bit more. Some give you a reprieve. So just bringing that into your chart. But from the 25th to the 13th, you would have gone over 22 degrees of Sagittarius to 8 degrees of Capricorn. And whatever was coming up in all those Mercury type of narratives that I mentioned, whatever was coming up, what have you been thinking about? What have you been wondering? Why do I do this all the time? Why have I constantly been believing that? Did that come from me, or was that somebody else's narrative? Is that a societal belief? All of those types of things. Because that full moon, just as it went into that shadow, because that full moon was very much with the square to Saturn in Pisces, there may also be some deep self-doubt, self-critiquing, I'm not good enough, I'll never get it right. Why do I always do this? Why can I never leave so-and-so? Why do I, that kind of thing. If you've heard a lot of that coming through, pay close attention, because this is an opportunity to rewrite some of your stories. And unfortunately, our stories run around and around on the same train of thought, generally the same thoughts. And we think we're having so many of them, but it's the same ones looping. So this is what I love about working with a Mercury retrograde, is like, if I pay attention, I go, oh, I didn't realize how much I said that, thought that, felt that. But that's what's going on. So that pre-shadow is very important. Then this is the 13th. This is when it actually stations retrograde. And as you can see, the Pisces energy is now moved from the full moon in Gemini, where it was very square to Saturn. The connection is now this square of Sun and Moon, and even coming up Mars to Neptune. So there is still a bit of a Piscean energy, but now Neptune wants to tell a different story. Neptune wants the ideal. Neptune can become illusion, can become addiction, can become this is all too hard. So if your narrative has been a bit, woe is me, why me, what's wrong with me, why can't I this, why do I always that, then I want you to be careful that you don't decide to drown that, to numb that, to dull that in any way, shape, or form, because Neptune in Pisces can absolutely take you down that path. We're in the festive season. My newsletter is out as well. You can find it on my website or my links down below. If you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, you'll have to find it on my website, but you can subscribe to it there. It very much brings in this understanding of how do we take things sometimes too far, when is enough is enough. And we could definitely latch onto that with Neptune in Pisces squaring Sun, Moon, and Mars at this point as Mercury stations retrograde. However, we could also say, how do I build a new story? Because Neptune is also this kind of like storyteller, but like in a fairy tale way. Neptune is the fairy tale. Neptune is the ideal situation. And sometimes because we go so kind of out of bounds in some ways, like there's no boundaries with Neptune, he could just tell this beautiful story and he doesn't think about the reality of it. But remember, Mercury has stationed retrograde in a very reality-driven, Saturn-ruled Capricorn. So there is the potential to use this beautiful Neptune in Pisces energy to rewrite your story in a way that is almost fantastical, but grounded because Mercury is holding you there with the Capricorn energy. And I kind of love that. So then as we get to the stationing direct, he's gone all the way back now. You can see here is Mercury at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. So it's that same degree point. He's now traveled all the way back. So from the 25th to the 13th, he traveled over from 22 to 8, 22 Sag to 8 Capricorn. Then he stopped. Then from 13th of December to the 2nd of January, he's gone backwards. That is the period where it gets messy, usually. The pre-shade is where we start to go, oh, interesting, look what's showing up. Oh, I wonder what that's come to show me. And we have all these little gentle epiphanies, but they're whispering to you unless you're paying attention. You may miss them in the pre-shade because they're not really a problem yet, usually. By the time we get into the retrograde, they start to become a problem. They start to build up into a level of discomfort that makes us like, you know, that saying, there's no growth in the comfort zone and there's no comfort in the growth zone. The retrograde is where we're getting uncomfortable because we're going to affect change and grow, which is kind of what we're meant to be doing. So, but this is usually why people hate Mercury retrogrades and gets a bad reputation, because this is where things get muddly. This is where I forget to read the contract properly, or I forget to take the passport to the airport, or I totally assumed that so-and-so meant this, and I responded in the completely wrong way, or they respond in the completely wrong way. Did I lead someone on? Oh my gosh, they came onto me. I didn't know I did that. Those kind of things. And then, oh, the shame, oh, the trauma. That's Mercury in retrograde. It's not actually bad. It's just making us recognize, why did I not communicate my thoughts more clearly there? Was I being a people pleaser? When I'm leaving for the airport, there are, you know, maybe I need to write a checklist if I get really scattered, so that things as important as the ticket or the passport are not forgotten, such things. So this is the period from the 13th to the 2nd, 13th December, 2nd of January. This is uncomfortable. You might also realize that this is right over the Christmas New Year period. So we are oftentimes with family, we will find a lot of old dynamics and old storylines coming up. You know, when you put family together that have like grown up and live apart and then come back together. Or if you are choosing not to go into those situations and you're saying, I'm doing a family-free Christmas, even that, it's like, I'm trying to change the narrative. And then there's also that like, oh, the guilt, the shame, maybe I should have. All of those things, whatever that is for you this year, this is a tricky time to have a Mercury retrograde, because there will be triggering based on the time of year that it happens. But then again, we shouldn't avoid the triggers. We should observe the triggers. Why am I still triggered by that? Why did that hit so hard? Why did that hurt so hard? Why did I say that thing? I didn't mean to hurt that person. Why do I always allow myself to be triggered by such and such and then lash out at so-and-so? Or those are the things. This is a gift for us. It doesn't always feel like it when we're in it, but think of it as a Christmas gift for those who celebrate Christmas of, I'm going to see some deep patterns and I'm going to have the opportunity to gently or aggressively affect change in my life. And then if we go back to the chart here, but now we want to go into the next year so we can see where the shadow, oops, wait, I've gone too low. Sorry, where the shadow ends. Okay, so then January 2nd, we go direct, and then we get to 8 degrees again for the last time on the 21st of January. So from the 2nd of January to the 21st of January, we're in the post shadow. And when we're in that post shadow, this is where we suddenly may find solutions to the things that got really uncomfortable that are now showing up for us. We're like, I see what happened there. I just quickly want to come back to this chart and point out to you that by the time that Mercury goes direct, and he's now come back from 8 degrees, he's now at 22. He's gone over Mars. Mars is almost at the end of his journey in Sagittarius. Sun has, at the point just before Mercury stations direct, Sun has triggered the 8 degrees where Mercury went retrograde. So you can see this dance. I mean, Moon by this point, she's moved almost all the way around the chart. We started her here late Sag. She traveled all the way around, and by the time this whole thing's finished, she's she's almost back at Mercury. So in fact, she might have done that more than once. Anyway, I'm getting too far ahead of myself here. What you want to see really how strongly the Sun and Mars, even though they are separating, have been very, very, very active in this whole thing. In fact, the moon was at 25 degrees. So Mars has recently triggered where the moon was when Mercury went retrograde. So Sun and Mars, this is a dynamic Mercury retrograde. It brings us some grounding with the Capricorn. It brings us some fire and drive with the Sagittarius. It brings us all of this stuff happening at a time of year where a lot of people are surrounded by old stories, old paradigms, or making very conscious choices to do new stories, new paradigms. Either one of those things, Mercury is a very dual planet. Either one of those things can bring us great triggering, going back into the old paradigm or forcing ourselves into the new paradigm, leave us feeling all the feels. So it's a very dynamic Mercury retrograde. If we give ourselves a good reset, stay in our observers as much as possible, look at how things are playing out. And remember, you're not the only one experiencing this. This is another thing I find very, very important to point out. When we start looking at our chart and our astrology, we're like, oh, you shouldn't say this to me because right now such as my Mercury is triggered by this Mercury retrograde going straight over my own natal Mercury, and I really can't deal with you saying this to me. Well, that person has a chart too. And that person is experiencing Mercury retrograde too. So quite frankly, we're all just doing our best all the time. And some people's best is not good enough for you. And your best is not good enough for them. And really, we can only come from our own standpoint and do ourselves to the best of our ability. However, whenever feeling completely overwhelmed and like you would like to throttle someone, remember that they have their own chart, they have their own story, they have their own process going on. And just allow a breath for grace and understanding that each of us are undergoing some or other excavation. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. We're not comparing with each other. We're giving each other a little bit of grace. I think that's Christmas spirit. I think that's the best we can do with this. Okay, before this gets ridiculously long and I've overloaded you, I'm going to sign off and say thank you very much for your time. Thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful. I really appreciate all your likes, shares, follows, subscribes, comments, so that I know that this is landing for you, this is working for you, this is supporting you. And I wish you a wonderful, wonderful Mercury retrograde. And all my links will be below for you to check out if you choose. Thank you so much for watching.